Going to file item 82, AB 339. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 339 by Assemblymember Gordon and others enacting to healthcare coverage.
Assemblymember Gordon, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 339 is designed to ensure consumer access to vital medications. This bill builds on existing California law and recent federal guidance to provide basic consumer protections that take the patient out of the middle of the negotiations between health plans and pharmaceutical manufacturers. Californians with cancer, HIV/AIDS, hepatitis, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, lupus, and other serious and chronic conditions need high-cost specialty drugs. Today, consumers with these serious health conditions can be asked to pay as much as $6,600 for a month's prescription for a single drug. AB 339 limits what a consumer pays to $275 per 30-day prescription. The California Health Benefits Review Program, which analyzed AB 339, found that there is a preponderance of evidence from studies that persons who face higher cost sharing for prescription drugs are less likely to maintain meaningful levels of adherence than persons who face lower cost sharing. And poor adherence to prescription drug therapy for chronic conditions is associated with higher rates of hospitalization and emergency department visits. There have been concerns raised that AB 339 will increase premiums. However, the California Health Benefits Review Program found that premium increases are estimated to be only 0.3% for enrollees with group insurance and 0.7% for enrollees with individual market policies. As demonstrated by this data, the benefits of this bill in increasing medication adherence far outweigh any negatives. A question was raised whether AB 339 interferes with Covered California's efforts. Covered California is a state agency bound by state law. To their credit, they have moved ahead to try to find a solution on high-cost prescription drugs for their 1.4 million enrollees, and they have recently instituted a cost-sharing cap that is similar to the one in this bill. I ask you to join me in supporting these important consumer protections which ensure that Californians are better able to afford their prescription drugs and that drug benefit designs are not discriminatory. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll. Tally vote ayes 42, noes 26. Measure passes. We've already dispensed with file item 83. We're moving to file item 84. That's AB 356. We're going to pass and retain on file item 84 and 85. Moving to file item 86. That's AB 470. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 470 by Assemblymember Kansan-Chu and others enacting relating to social services.
Mr. Kansan-Chu, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to present AB 470, a bill to expedite the processing of criminal background checks for applicants seeking to be in-home supportive services providers. Each year, thousands of the applicants are unable to provide the in-home supportive services due to a delay in the completion of required background check. The delay could range from a few months to up to a year. And this bill is necessary to put people back to work and also to provide the consumers that may receive the services they need in order to lead healthy and self-directed life. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 61, noes 2. Measure passes. File item 87, pass and retain. Moving to file item 88. That's AB 621. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 621 by Assemblymember Roger Hernandez, enacted into employment.
Mr. Hernandez.
Mr. Speaker and members, Assembly Bill 621 will transform and modernize port drayage operations by providing a limited opportunity of amnesty for motor carriers that come forward and correctly satisfy or classify their drivers as employees rather than independent contractors. As many of you know, there have been serious problems with the misclassification of port truck drivers over the past few decades. Under AB 621, port drayage companies will be provided an opportunity to voluntarily come forward to participate in a limited amnesty program by entering into a consent decree with the Labor Commissioner. AB 621 is an important first step in the industry's efforts to modernize and improve efficiency at our ports, which represent a vital component of our state and federal economy. AB 621 will enable motor carriers in the drayage industry to make the right decision for the benefit of all interested stakeholders. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. See no discussion or debate on this item. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. 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 All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Mr. Hernandez, what's your pleasure? Mr. Hernandez moves the call. Okay, members, moving to file item 89. That's AB 626. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 626 by Assemblymember Lowe and others, enacted into community colleges.
Mr. Lowe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. As a former faculty member, I'm pleased to bring Assembly Bill 626. There's a long-standing statewide policy enacted under the Duke-Majan administration that focused on a 75% full-time faculty ratio, and this would focus and require the Chancellor's Office to work with stakeholders into developing a full-time to part-time faculty ratio, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 48, noes 21. Measure passes. File item 90. That's AB 662. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 662 by Assemblymember Bonilla, enacted into public accommodation.
Ms. Bonilla.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. This was a very interesting bill that was brought to me by some of my constituents. A couple of mothers came with their adult children who are confined to wheelchairs, and they said we have a problem. And the problem is that when we take our adult children out, and you know the culture is changing, more and more severely handicapped people are going out and wanting to partake in outside venues. But they said, you know, we have a problem that there are no changing places for our disabled children or disabled adults that we have. This bill, AB 662, would institute that in places that have over 1,000 visitors a day, that they would need to provide in the future for an adult changing facility. It requires the state architect, the Building Standards Commission, or the appropriate state regulatory entity to adopt regulations by January 1, 2020 for the installation and maintenance of an adult changing station. So the bill is not prescriptive. It does not dictate what that changing table would be or how it would be designed. We're asking the building regulators to do that for us. But it would ensure that a great number of Californians who currently find that they either would have to change the adult on the floor of a bathroom, the opportunity to have a secure and safe and private area so that these individuals are able to go to places that many in the public are able to enjoy and be out there enjoying it as well. I ask for your aye vote on this measure.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll. Tie the vote. Ayes 42, noes 18. Measure passes. File item 91, AB 672. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 672 by Assemblymember Jones Sawyer, an act relating to inmates.
Mr. Jones Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 672 requires CDCR to provide transitional services to wrongly convicted individuals upon their release from prison. Over the last 2 decades, the number of people exonerated in the United States has nearly tripled every year. After spending decades in prison for crimes they didn't commit, wrongfully convicted persons are released back into the community without access to basic transitional services such as housing assistance, job training, or drug rehabilitation. Simply put, this bill will provide access to the same services that parolees are able to receive upon release from custody. In 2011, Mr. Obi Anthony, after being wrongfully convicted, was released from detention after spending 17 years in prison. Mr. Anthony was the inspiration for this bill. He was released from prison with nothing but his clothes and a few dollars in his pockets. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Jones Sawyer. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tie the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. Measure passes. Moving to file item 93. That's AB 743. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 743 by Assemblymember Eggman and others, an act relating to CalWorks.
Ms. Eggman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 743 seeks to remove unnecessary barriers for hardworking CalWorks recipients who are attempting to improve their lives as well as the lives of their family. The bill will exempt education benefits paid to veterans when determining CalWorks eligibility and ensure that people who are complying with welfare to work programs by participating in an educational degree or vocational training program are not sanctioned by unnecessary reasons. This bill was recently amended to address concerns with child care cost, and it has no opposition. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tie the vote. Ayes 45, noes 20. Measure passes. File item 94 is passed and retained. Moving to file item 95, that's AB 779. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 779 by Assemblymember Christina Garcia, an act relating to environmental quality.
Ms. Garcia.
Members, in recent years, infill development has been lauded as the most environmentally desirable type of development in the state. Located within a half mile of a major transit spot, infill is associated with fewer cars on the road and less miles traveled. Infill projects are inherently low in greenhouse gases. They are also one of the best mechanisms for breathing economic life into our inner cities. However, infill projects are already some of the most expensive development projects due to mitigation efforts and delays. This bill gives OPR the authority to determine that transportation impacts, including those measured by BMT, do not meet the threshold of significance for residential and mixed-use projects within transit priority areas. This version of the bill addresses the concerns of those who were opposed of the previous versions of the bill. It no longer delays approval of CEQA guidelines currently being drafted. AB 779 can help achieve California's objectives of reducing greenhouse gases and revitalizing our urban centers. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Bigelow, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee, I rise today because Republicans abstained on AB 779 in the Assembly Appropriations Committee due to late amendments, as the author addressed. The amendments taken in appropriations are supportable, and I am recommending an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow. With that, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally vote. Ayes 63, no 0. Measure passes. Members, we are moving to file item 98. That's AB 848. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 848 by Assembly Member Mark Stone, enacting into alcohol and drug treatment programs.
Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, alcohol and drug programs, residential facilities that are licensed by the states are not allowed to bring medical providers on site. It violates their license. What this bill does is would allow such a residential facility to bring a medical provider, allow a doctor, mental health professional to do a house call, if you will, instead of having to take their client out to their medical facility. It allows for facilities who wish to partake of this licensing category to be able to seek that license, and it asks the department to come up with rules and regulations to facilitate that. And with this, I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 58, noes 2. Measure passes. Moving to file item 99. That's AB 876. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 876 by Assembly Member McCarty, enacting into solid waste.
Mr. McCarty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 876 builds off last year's landmark AB 1826, which will divert millions of tons of organic waste out of our landfills. However, without proper planning, California can miss out on the significant environmental and health benefits. This bill will require jurisdictions to include a 15-year plan for the siting of organic waste facilities in California. This is a smart approach to furthering the diversion of organic waste from our landfills, and I appreciate an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarty. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 42, noes 23. Measure passes. File item 100. AB 883. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 883 by Assembly Member Lowe, enacting into employment.
Mr. Lowe, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 883 prohibits employers from publishing or posting a job advertisement that disqualifies an applicant who is currently or was at one point a public employee. The current trend in employment practices has surfaced, one that requires an applicant for employment to not be a participant of a governmental retirement plan. Consequently, qualified job applicants are now being discriminated against. This bill would level the playing field, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 43, noes 21. Measure passes. File item 101, AB 937. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 937 by Assembly Member Salas, enacting into water.
Mr. Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 937 would require the Department of Water Resources to provide technical assistance to disadvantaged communities so that they may participate in groundwater planning. With that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. Measure passes. File item 103. That's AB 967. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 967 by Assembly Member Williams and others, enacting into post-secondary education.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Speaker, members, I appreciate your indulgence on the third of our sexual assault package. This requires California's public post-secondary education systems, as well as each independent post-secondary institution, to adopt a consistent standard of punishment for campus sexual assault cases. What we found in hearings across the state is someone could be found culpable for sexual assault but only suspended for a couple quarters. This bill would require a minimum punishment of at least 2 years suspension up to expulsion if a student is found responsible for campus sexual assault. The bill would also require campuses to publicly report and disclose campus adjudication outcomes for sexual assault offenses. Members, this is a very important part of the bill because even with our oversight authority as the state legislature, many of these institutions waited till the last possible moment, till we were actually on their campus or 3 minutes before the hearing began to provide any information as to adjudication outcomes for sexual assault. The Washington Post obtained survey data of about 100 schools, and they discovered that out of the 478 sanctions meted out for sexual assault, only 12% were expulsions and 28% were suspensions. That means, all told, more than half were not even removed from school. Many survivors of campus sexual assault decide not to report to the proper authorities because they feel that the university will not take their case seriously. Members, if we want victims to report, we have to make the fact that there might be accountability known and public. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 62, noes 4. Measure passes. File item 104, AB 988. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 988 by Assemblymember Mark Stone and others, enacting into parks, making appropriation therefore.
Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As amazing as California's natural resources are, there are many of our underserved communities who don't have access to them, and especially our kids. What AB 988 does is it creates an outdoor education fund to facilitate programs that take kids into our environment, whether it's our mountains, our deserts, or our beaches and oceans. With this program, which will be funded both with public money and with private money, we really open up the door for kids who need to and have the opportunity to learn about the different STEM fields, science fields, encourage them to be stewards and care for our environment, and encourage them into fields and opportunities they would not have elsewhere. This bill has been tried before. I ran this last year. It was held in appropriations without a good funding source, thanks to my co-author, Madam Speaker, or a joint author, Madam Speaker, and the Assembly budget staff. We've identified some funds in Prop 40 that would allow us to put some public money on the table, be able to garner some private money as well to fully fund this program and get our kids out into our environments. It's a great program. It's a good opportunity for our communities, and I respectfully request your aye votes.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 56, noes 2. Measure passes. We are moving to file item 106. That's AB 1091. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1091 by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia, enacting related to student financial aid.
Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Speaker and members, AB 1091 streamlines California's financial aid process to increase Cal Grant and FAFSA completion rates here in California. The bill has received bipartisan support, and there is no known opposition. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 63, noes 2. Measure passes. File item 107, AB 1095. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1095 by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia, enacting to Salt and Sea.
Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Speaker and members, AB 1095 lives up to the commitment that was made by the state of California in 2003 by the signing of the quantification settlement agreement that would transfer close to 30 million acre-feet of water to parts of California. The Salton Sea is the largest man-made lake in California, in danger of becoming one of the biggest environmental catastrophes for our state. AB 1095 will require the Natural Resources Agency to report to the legislature by March 31st, 2016 on eligible shovel-ready projects. The governor has recently put together a task force to address the issue of the Salton Sea. At this time, there is no known opposition, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 63, no 0. Measure passes. Moving to file item 108, that's AB 1117. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1117 by Assembly Member Cristina Garcia and Act relating to vaccinations.
Ms. Garcia, you may open.
Colleagues, AB 1117 would bring additional targeted resources to the stretched Medi-Cal system to help improve California's vaccination rates for 2-year-olds. The bill would create the California Childhood Immunization Quality Improvement Fund, which would include voluntary contributions from Medi-Cal managed care organizations and be matched by an equal amount of federal funds. Experience in other states demonstrate that targeted administrative supports and financial incentives can result in improved immunization rates for children in Medicaid. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Hadley, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this measure. There is no higher return on investment that we can make in public health than in vaccination for those in California who need it most, and I thank the author for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. And with that, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 53, noes 11. Measure passes. File item 109, AB 1124. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1124 by Assembly Member Perea and Act relating to workers' compensation.
Mr. Perea.
Mr. Speaker, members, AB 1124 is a measure that would require the Administrative Director of the Division of Workers' Compensation to establish a prescription drug formulary in California's workers' comp system. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Perea. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 65, no 0. Measure passes. File item 110, AB 1162. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1162 by Assembly Member Holden and Act relating to Medi-Cal.
Mr. Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I present Assembly Bill 1162, a bill that will fight tobacco dependence and save health care costs for California. AB 1162 clarifies which tobacco cessation treatments are covered under Medi-Cal and removes barriers to those treatments. Smoking is the leading preventable cause of death in the United States, but there are effective medical treatments to help smokers quit. Unfortunately, the Medi-Cal population faces higher risks of smoking and more barriers to treatment, like long wait times for appointments and fewer primary care doctors. AB 1162 provides greater access to health coverage that will both change lives and reduce health care costs. The health plans have raised concerns in committee. I have taken an amendment in Assembly Appropriations to narrow the scope of this bill by restricting the bill's provisions to currently approved drugs only. For these reasons, I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 56, noes 9. Measure passes.